Welcome back to the third installment of The Tangible Darkness. I appreciate your continued presence on this journey through time as I probe deeper into my personal encounters with the supernatural. But before we begin, let me provide you with a disclaimer. I'm well aware that many of you have been anxiously awaiting this episode, and for good reason. The tale I'm about to unravel is one of the most profound paranormal experiences I have ever had, all revolving around the Ouija board. This macabre saga unfolded over the course of several haunting years. To maintain the suspenseful flow of content, I'll be splitting this story into a minimum of 3 episodes. I want you, the listener, to become engulfed in every minute detail, to feel as though you're right there with me, immersed in the darkness. So once again, sit back, relax, grab a drink or a snack, turn the lights down, and let's get started. The year is 1995. I decided to accompany my best friend Sammy on a visit to an antique store in downtown San Antonio, Texas. Sammy has a fondness for sculptured glass, whether it resembled animals or an object, or held aesthetic beauty in any form. This antique store still exists today. It's a 3-story emporium where vendors rent spaces to sell their various goods. You can find a wide array of items, from a vendor with a vast collection of vinyl records — he's an admitted hoarder with his records extending beyond his stall — to 8-track cassettes, vintage Time Life magazines, vintage clothing, and even authentic Nazi memorabilia. This antique mall truly offers a diverse selection. We explore each floor, and Sammy manages to find a couple of items that catch his eye. After making his purchases, we discussed where to go next. We continue down Houston Street and stumble upon another antique store similar to the previous one, with different vendors occupying sections of the space. As we enter, a friendly woman greets us from the register, and we begin browsing. Although we had just left a massive antique mall, I suddenly felt the urge to inquire about antique Ouija boards. I asked Sammy if I should approach the woman at the register to inquire about their availability. I asked him this because at the time we were living together, and some people have strong objections to having such objects in their homes. I was curious to gauge his reaction. Upon receiving his response, it becomes clear that he has no problem about it. I make my way back to the front of the store and approach the woman at the register. I inquire if they have ever sold vintage or antique Ouija boards. I can't recall her exact response, but I then ask if they currently have any for sale. She promptly replies, "No, we don't have any." I thank her for the information and begin to walk away. As I take a few steps away from the register, she calls out, "Wait." I stop, turn around and ask, "Yes?" She informs me, "As a matter of fact, we do have one." She points me towards a particular vendor and suggests I speak with her. I approach the vendor and explain what I'm looking for. She produces a remarkably well-preserved, very old Ouija board, complete with its original packaging. Years later, after conducting some research, I discovered that the board was estimated to be between 65 and 80 years old. I recall my excitement and joy upon stumbling upon such a remarkable find. It strikes me as odd that I didn't think to ask about it at the previous antique store. The thought only occurred to me in the second store, and it turns out that they had one available. It felt as though fate had intervened, guiding me to this discovery. Sadly, this particular antique store no longer exists and has been closed for many years. This sequence of events has all the makings of a suspenseful Hollywood movie. Random shoppers visiting antique stores, suddenly feeling compelled to ask about a specific item, only to find that the desired item miraculously exists. It sets the stage for a chilling, supernatural tale that gradually unfolds into something horrifying. You may think this is a fantastic way to begin my story. However, despite everything being true as I've described, this is not actually where it all starts. Nevertheless, this vintage Ouija board will play a significant role in a physically dangerous manner years later. It's crucial to note that based on my experiences and those of others, there is reason to believe that the entities we summon through the Ouija board can move between boards or even other objects. So that's how I acquired my antique Ouija board. Now let's rewind a year to 1994 when the actual story begins. It's the year 1994 and I recently turned 21. While I finally have some stability in my life, my financial situation is not great. I'm working a job where my manager keeps reducing my hours, making it difficult to make ends meet. I can barely afford bills and rent, with little left for food or anything else for that matter. I even remember a time when I had nothing but potatoes to cook for dinner. It was a very challenging period for me. My family situation is also complicated, much like my friends Taryn and Jay. We all have strained relationships with our mothers. Jay often gets into arguments with his mother, sometimes leaving home for extended periods to cool down. He indirectly expresses interest in living with me and my current roommate, Pete. But Pete doesn't want another person in our limited space. Eventually, Jay finds an apartment nearby, and he convinces me to move in with him, leaving my current apartment. Taryn is also dealing with issues with her mother, and since her living situation is uncomfortable, Jay invites her to join us in our new place. During this time, I frequently go out clubbing, sometimes up to 3 nights a week. Different people have various coping mechanisms, like alcohol, food, or drugs, but for me, music is what I find intoxicating. The club environment becomes my escape from reality, where everything feels right. Surrounded by like-minded people, music, and lights, I enjoy every moment and forget about the problems and dislikes in my life. I became the self-proclaimed queen of the club life, loving the ritual of transforming myself in front of the mirror. However, when the night ends, reality sets in, and I'm reminded of my problems and discontent with life. Thankfully, my coping mechanism doesn't cause any harm, except for occasional work absences and job loss. Now let's talk about the Ouija board. It didn't start with an old vintage board, but rather when Jay bought one from Toys R Us. I don't remember when he got it or how long he had it before I became interested in trying it out. Jay and I tried it together initially, but nothing noteworthy happened. We didn't have much patience, and I quickly asked Taryn to join me in giving it a shot. As we placed our hands on the planchette, we asked if there was anyone present. After a few moments of silence, we repeated the process, but again, nothing happened. On a whim, I suggested trying it again, but this time asking in 3 times instead of once. It felt like the right thing to do for some reason. We put our hands on the planchette once more and asked, "If anyone is here, please speak to us now." We repeated this 2 more times. To our surprise, the planchette began to move. We pulled our hands away, laughing and asking each other if the other had moved it. Both Taryn and I swore that we hadn't. Placing our hands back in position, the planchette continued to move, slowly spelling out the word hello. We nervously laughed, but we were convinced that neither of us was manipulating it. As the session progressed, the speed of the planchette increased, and the responses evolved from short words to complete sentences. It became so fast that Jay had to begin writing down the letters for us because we couldn't keep up. We were amazed and couldn't believe that the Ouija board, which many people claimed didn't work, was actually working for us, specifically Taryn and me. We tried it with Jay and others, but it only worked when Taryn and I used it together. However, there was always a lingering thought that we might be unconsciously moving it and shaping the words we wanted to see. Ideomotor phenomenon refers to the occurrence when the subconscious mind generates slight, involuntary movements that are then interpreted as deliberate actions. In the context of the Ouija board, participants' eyes make subconscious movements towards specific letters solely by observing the board. This implies that the participants are not consciously controlling the planchette, but rather their subconscious is influencing their movements. A study reveals the collaboration of 2 predictive minds in creating the Ouija board experience. This study demonstrates that participants' brains unconsciously predict the planchette's movements based on their expectations of the desired answer. Consequently, participants are not actually communicating with spirits, but rather their own brains are constructing the responses. Moreover, Ouija boards can provide valuable insights into human psychology and our understanding of ourselves. Psychologists have gained valuable knowledge about the human body and mind through the examination of Ouija board phenomena. However, it is essential to remember that the Ouija board does not provide significant information about the spirit world. In conclusion, scientific explanations for the use of Ouija boards suggest that the phenomenon is not supernatural, but rather a result of the human subconscious and predictive minds. While Ouija boards can offer insights into human psychology, it is crucial to approach their usage with caution and respect. As previously mentioned, I classify myself as an open-minded skeptic. It is crucial for me to validate that the occurrences I witness are not simply the result of natural and explicable phenomena. I strive to gather evidence and convince myself that there is a distinct and otherworldly influence at play. And that I did. I reiterated to Taryn that I genuinely wasn't responsible for moving the planchette, and she confirmed that she wasn't moving it either. Considering the possibility of subconscious movements, I propose that we continue using the Ouija board while blindfolded to ensure the authenticity of our experience. We located some bandanas and covered our eyes. With blindfolds on, we proceeded to ask a question. Similar to our first attempt, it started slowly for unknown reasons, but within a few minutes, it regained its previous speed. We continued asking the board more and more questions. I had expected it to produce random letters or nonsensical messages, So when Taryn and I removed our blindfolds and asked Jay about the responses, I burst into laughter and disbelief. Jay showed me the paper, which displayed coherent sentences without any misspellings or grammatical errors. At that moment, I really struggled to convey the mix of emotions I felt. We had successfully established communication with something beyond our world using a board purchased from a toy store. It felt like a scene from a supernatural horror movie, as we had unequivocally proven the reality of this phenomenon. Excitement, intrigue, and an eerie sensation overwhelmed us simultaneously. I wished we could have captured this on video or with modern smartphones, but back in 1994, we couldn't afford a video camera, and cell phones didn't possess such capabilities. This achievement was monumental. We had connected with an entity from the other side, communicating its thoughts through the board. Have you ever heard of James Randi, also known as the Amazing Randi? James Randi was a stage magician, and he established the James Randi Educational Foundation, which launched a challenge offering a $1 million prize to individuals who could demonstrate paranormal abilities in scientifically controlled conditions. Randi conceived this challenge originally in 1964 due to his frustration with fraudulent mediums and fortune tellers who exploited the public using simple tricks. The initial prize amount was $1,000, but it was later increased to $1 million thanks to a generous donation by Rick Adams, an internet pioneer. Despite the existence of this challenge, no one ever successfully claimed the prize. Unfortunately, none of us were aware of this opportunity, otherwise we would have eagerly participated. This experience deeply impacted me. It sparked countless questions as I realized I could converse with something capable of answering questions that no living person could. With the blindfolds no longer necessary, we continued asking more questions as we had developed a sense of trust among ourselves. We reached a point where we started using the Ouija board on a daily basis. Our fascination with it continued to grow, particularly because it consistently communicated with clarity and precision whenever we posed a question. Driven by my unusual curiosity, I asked a rather unconventional question, inquiring about the identity of the entity. I specifically asked if it was a spirit, to which it promptly responded that it was of a demonic nature. Surprisingly, this revelation didn't deter us or change our behavior. We remained captivated by the board, unfazed by the admittedly unsettling fact. Our fascination remained unwavering, and we continued to use it without hesitation. Then another question crossed my mind. I asked for its name. It provided us with an unfamiliar and peculiar name. None of us had ever encountered that name before. Years later, we discovered that it was actually a German word. None of us were fluent in German, so naturally we were unaware that it held any meaning. Given the extraordinary nature of our experiences, it wasn't surprising that the entity offered a name completely foreign to us. Due to my belief in the power of spoken words and their potential impact, I want to clarify that I will never mention the name throughout this podcast or any other time. We persisted in our regular use of the board, the thrill of it driving us forward. Bursting with excitement, I couldn't help but share the unfolding events with my former roommate, Pete. After all, he just lived right next door. However, he remained skeptical, either disbelieving my accounts or dismissing them as exaggerations. On one of our evenings off from work, or the club, we made a decision. We wanted others to witness the remarkable occurrences for themselves. Prepare yourself for the upcoming revelations as the board begins to unveil intimate and personal information about some of our guests during our next Ouija board session. Additionally, you will soon discover how one of my dear friends becomes entangled and captivated by the notion that this demonic entity can grant them immense wealth at a grave cost, something truly precious. Listen as Taryn asks the entity to get rid of someone for them. And also, listen as Pete challenges the authenticity of the Ouija board, and his test fails, proving what I've been saying has been true all along. Stay tuned for all this and even more astonishing details.